Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you are with us, that you love us, that you care about us, and you're never going to leave us. Lord, we thank you. Lord, we pray for a blessing over this meeting tonight. Lord, we ask that you lead and guide the discussion so that your truth, your mercy, your justice, and your goodness will reign in our schools. Lord, we lift up this school and the decisions that it makes for the benefit of our kids and for the future of our community. We give it all over to you. We love you, Lord. It's all in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:12. And roll call, Monty.
Yes.
Drew.
Yes.
Sue.
Here.
Tamara.
Here.
Lana.
Here.
Jim.
Here.
And I am here. We do have a quorum. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Ronnie. All in favor? That's everyone. I have a report from Washington.
Yes, just updating our quarantine procedures. As of right now, Jackson County has not changed any of their guidance since repealing the mask mandate in early May. We continue to monitor that. We also continue to monitor CDC, but as of right now, there have been no changes to those quarantine procedures.
And I have a question on that, because I spoke with someone with the Department of Health and Senior Services, trying to get some clarification about the quarantines and stuff, because I couldn't find anything on their website other than their recommended documentation for schools. And in doing that, he looked through their website. He wasn't able to contact anybody at the moment, but he said he couldn't find anything either. So I'm wondering if they can give us something in writing showing us where the, what's it called? The, not the mandate, but the, I can't think of the word, where it's stipulated that we have to quarantine. We are under a contact tracing, but that was the only thing that he could find in reference to that, and it expires the 30th of June. So he says he's not sure if that is where that information is coming from, but suggested we get it in writing. So if you could look into that, please.
Sure. And you're talking specifically about quarantining?
Yes.
Okay, and when you click on Jackson County, it takes you to the CDC. It takes you straight there and links it.
Okay. Well, like I said, he suggested that we get something in writing from them of what they are mandating.
And they, last I looked, Jackson County has no mandates, they're all recommendations.
All recommendations. Yep.
So is our plan to continue quarantining for 14 days? Anybody exposed to a positive case? Per their recommendations then?
Per Jackson County recommendations. Yes, we've followed Jackson County guidance from day one, and I know it's not always popular, but we've done that with Jackson County from the start.
Okay, then my next question would be, if we're gonna continue with the quarantines, how are we gonna handle that when school starts? Because we're not doing a virtual option for kids, so if they're out for 14 days, how are they going to learn? Have we thought about what that procedure is gonna look like?
Yes, we are, right now the plan is for us to still continue to push materials through Google Classroom. Every student still has their own Chromebook, so teachers still use that platform, so students that are absent will still be able to access that material.
So then will we be having the Google Classroom, like the live meets for them to log into the classroom if they're on quarantine?
I don't think that determination has been made yet.
Isn't part of the Ezra 3 funds, isn't that gonna be a big piece of it, is having those plans in place and having more information that's gonna be out to answer some of those questions about the worst case, and, you know, what do we do, particularly with the new variants, and I think that's what the health departments are gearing up for, and from my understanding is that they are not gonna well, they won't make mandates, they never have, but they're also not gonna loosen up because of the new variants, particularly that they're seeing in southern Missouri, so there's concerns there.
Right, and part of the ESER three, requirements was for the district to have, our return to school procedures online by last Wednesday, and we did have that. Those return to school procedures, which we were already doing, talks about masks, talks about hygiene, talks about social distancing, and those are posted on our website under our COVID, protocols.
I think there's legitimate concern among parents, particularly on the amount of quarantining we do and the wide swath. And as a parent, it concerns me that sometimes we're using a shotgun approach. And I realize from a nursing standpoint, they would disagree with me, but it hasn't borne out. The science doesn't seem to bear out that this is a particularly dangerous thing for people less than 18 years old. And the mental piece of what we're doing to these kids by sending them home for 14 days because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time potentially outweighs that, doesn't it? Am I alone in this, or?
No. The other concern that I have is now that we have vaccine is discriminating between kids that are vaccinated and kids that aren't vaccinated. Because there are families in this community that are not comfortable getting their kids or themselves vaccinated. And you can open up some, for lack of a better word, bullying if you have kids that aren't getting that vaccination and they're in a sport and they can't play, well then that sport is down, and that's not the way we should look at it as far as sports go, but it's going to come up because that's gonna be the situation. It already has in this last quarantine.
I don't know, what's the current situation on quarantine versus vaccination within the district? If somebody is vaccinated, are they not quarantined at all?
As far as vaccines go,
Yeah.
No, they're not.
They're not, so if
No.
you're fully vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine ever?
That's what was said to the basketball and football team.
Is that a district policy right now?
I'm
Not
gonna be honest
policy,
with
but,
you, I don't know. So, school got out for the summer,
yeah.
and I'm just gonna be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
But I see that's where some clarification with the sports teams comes into play, cause if everybody's vaccinated, then our sport gets to get played.
It's not just that, it's our
That's hard.
choirs, it's our band, it's everything.
Yeah.
You got band camp coming up, you've got all of those things. And I guess for me, the thing I wrestle with is again, what's the cost? Is the risk high enough to do the amount of shutting down that we did over last year? And I understand why we did it last year, I'm not questioning that, I was on board with all that. Do we wanna continue to do that?
I mean, the bad part, there's kind of a wait and see approach to it too, just to see, I mean, do numbers and things start going back up? Because so many things have been lifted, and then if numbers start going back up, then do you have to have a approach for that? I mean, that's what's hard, is it a wait and see, or is it, cause the decision you make today changes by the end of the summer?
Sure.
That's kinda how the whole thing has been, quite honestly.
It's
And we've
how
already,
been living for the last year and a half.
made precedent by going against what Jackson County had to say about masks, about the mask mandate, except for on the bus. And so, when that's a federal, mandate as well, so, right now, officially in Jackson County, if you are not vaccinated, you should still be wearing masks and doing all your 6 feet and all that. So I guess, I mean, we're already walking across the line on some of those
If
pieces.
you listen to Jackson County, we wouldn't have gone to school last year.
Sure.
So I'm confused a little bit about what it is the question about, do we continue the quarantine policy procedures, or is it just an update,
It's an update from Tom, but yeah, I'm curious what the board's position is as far as continuing the 14-day quarantines with contact tracing, as opposed to maybe quarantining only the positive test, still doing the contact tracing and notifying people. Do we need to quarantine everybody in contact for 14 days? Do we wanna continue that procedure?
I say no. I think it's okay if the school notifies the parents that they were obviously in close contact, but at the end of the day, my motivation is to try to get back to normal as soon as possible, which is the least amount of restrictions.
The notification's important, but once that notification's made, that leaves some responsibility to the parents or whatever as to what they elect to do. We're not keeping them from quarantining if that's what they elect to do. But I question whether we need to be mandating that they get
Or
quarantined.
it's a forced quarantine, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I don't think we've had enough evidence showing that quarantining 35 kids based on one positive is, I mean, I don't think the positive that we get out of that, I don't even know that there have been that many. And it's really hard to trace that too, because they may quarantine from school, but they're still going to work, they're still going and doing the things that they normally do. Again, that falls back on that parent and that family. So why wouldn't we do the same when it comes to their schooling?
We're not dictating whether they get vaccinated or not. So why should we dictate whether they wear a mask or not, or whether they get quarantined or not?
Other than a positive test, I mean, it makes sense to quarantine somebody that had a positive test, my opinion. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking, what we're really talking about is people that are caught up in the
Yeah, the contact tracing shows they were.
in the circumstances.
Right, in the circumstances, right.
But at this point now, I don't think, as a district contact tracing, I don't think that we are anymore. I mean, that's something that, I know with the limited times I had, I mean, for my children this year, there was no contact tracing. It was, there's one positive in your kid's classroom, whole class is quarantined. So it wasn't like,
That's for the
You have
younger
younger kids that
schools.
are in cohort.
The younger
cohorts, so,
buildings.
yeah.
yeah,
The
At
high
the
school
older
and
level,
middle
they
school
did.
was different.
it was being done there.
Mhm.
But then on a sports team, then there is no contact tracing because
They're all together.
they're all together, so they're out no matter
But
what.
that's why they segregated with the football, that's why they had, ninth and JV and varsity trying to end the different, positions so that they were isolating them a little bit more.
Mhm.
So we need to make a motion to remove the quarantine from the students unless you test positive? Is that what you,
I mean, do we wanna act today, or do we want to get more input and act next month? I just wanted to start the conversation, because I don't wanna get into the school year and be having it, right?
Yeah, personally, I'd like to gather more information. Where I work, they're dealing with this on a daily basis around their response plans in the region. I'd like to get a sense of what the regional health directors are having to say about it. I know what Jackson County has to say. However, I'd like to get a better sense of the region, and then what's the tipping point? Where do we go back to quarantine? What happens when the Delta variant is more prevalent in the community and we start to see more cases? What are gonna be our mechanisms to respond proactively before? So I would like to gather more information before we really talk through a policy. I'm not a health official. It's a total unknown, so I would feel more comfortable getting more information before we really update a procedure for the fall, within that personally. And I only say that because I have 2 classrooms of a partner of ours with infant toddlers that had to close down this week because of exposure, and so it's still happening. I think we have to remember that.
I think it's a valid point, that this wouldn't be, hey, we decided this for the whole year. Whatever we decide, maybe we have to put a trigger point in there based on positive cases, something, right? Of course.
I will tell you, no health director in the region will agree to what that rate is. There's
think
9
we're-
counties that I work with, and there's 9 different lines
Where they've
that
drawn
they
the
draw.
line, right?
Well,
we-
for,
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to move that we accept Tom's presentation on his update tonight.
I'll second.
I have a motion motion and a second to approve the quarantine procedures as presented by Tom Huffington. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Jeremy Catlett. Is he here? Hey, Jeremy? Doesn't look like we do. So, supposed to have a presentation from J.D. Dunn, but apparently J.D. Dunn is not here. New business, as presented by Tom Huffington. Actually, we just need to do the consent agenda, I apologize. I need a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda items.
So moved.
Thank you, Sue.
Second.
Monty? All in favor? Everyone? Now, I'll turn it over to Tom Uppington for a 2021-22 budget presentation.
Okay, as a separate packet there, you should have your district budget for the 21-22 school year. I've also got just a couple of slides that highlight that. It's nothing like that. Somebody want to click for me? Sure. Okay, we'll just go through the board packet here as far as your budget for the 2021 school year. First, I do need to thank all the administrators for their input. We wouldn't have a budget without them. But most importantly, the ladies in the office. They put in hours and hours, and I was bugging them constantly, asking for information, and they came through and they never complained. So I really want to thank everybody at central office for their input with the budget. It would not be possible without them, especially Shelley Ryan. Shelley got me numbers every single day, and I couldn't have got them without her. So we wouldn't have a budget without Shelley especially, so I just wanted to say thank you to her. Please consider this budget for the 21-22 school year. This budget is being submitted with input from all stakeholders with a vested interest in seeing the Oak Grove school system flourish and reach full potential. There's a balance to be struck between being fiscally responsible and placing an emphasis on our most valuable resources. Providing students with the highest quality education possible by hiring or training top-tier teachers and staff is a critical component of this balance. Please consider this budget for your approval. So that's just a quick budget message. Go ahead, Mr. Hames, thank you. Just our current status within the district, our enrollment for this last school year was 1,992 students. That's an increase of 35 students from the previous year. And over the 8-year average, we're up 27 students from that mark. Our average was 1,965 students in the last 8 years. I believe our low, it should be in your board packet there, was in 2019 of 1,931 students. So we've stayed pretty consistent. Go ahead, Coach, thank you. With our enrollment, and you can see that graph. As far as staff, we currently have 170 certified staff, 70 non-certified. Our tax levy for this last school year was 5.0367 per $100 of assessed valuation. That gets adjusted annually, which comes up at our our August board meeting. Will adjust our levy. Staff and salary benefits, current base salary of $35,900. Our assessed valuation within the district was $158,344,099. That's actually a decrease, and this is on page 3, of $2,247,000. $334 that our assessed valuation actually decreased from the most recent assessment, which was, you heard a lot of Jackson County, it jumped up well, they went back and recalculated, and we actually went down over $2 million in assessed valuation. That accounted for roughly $80,000 of revenue for the district that we lost as that assessment came back in lower. Your bond estimates, go back a little bit for me, please, Coach. Keep going. There you go, perfect, thank you. Bond estimates, we did $20 million in bond sales. The premiums we received on that were $3.46 million in premiums. We spent almost $11 million to date, so we've got a balance of $12,642,091.74. We are currently on schedule and on budget with our current bond project. So that's the state of the district currently. Assumptions for this school year. I'm assuming that our assessed valuation is going to increase to $160,574,101. That's an increase of 1% in assessed valuation, along with an assumption of we have about $650,000 in new construction being put on the tax roll. That's where that number comes from to account for that increase. Our enrollment, I estimated to be identical to this current year, 1,992 students. For our revenues, because 2021 was such an odd year, I used revenues from the previous school year. I'm very conservative on revenues, intentionally so, to account for that, and then try to be as aggressive as we can on expenditures, just to make sure that we're in a good place financially. New expenditures for this year, please go back one for me, Coach. Thank you. I would like to recommend that we increase the base salary for staff $350 and allow all staff to move on the salary schedule. That would account for the increase in the base of $194,000. That includes insurance and benefit increase. New classified staff $51,000. Two new certified positions at $98,000 additional expense. There's the insurance addition. The bond principal will be paying off $2,827,216 off of the bond principal. And you'll notice that expenditure for transportation, $667,813 for transportation. And if you notice on the revenues, we're actually being reimbursed only $164,000. So we are being shorted $500,000 on transportation.
Can I ask a question before we move on? With the ESSER II fundings, what is the time frame for expenditure of those funds that are being put in? Is it the full year?
Ms. Ryan, I'm going to defer to you on
I
that.
believe that actually extends until the 2022 school year.
Okay, so it'll go through, it's a 2-year, and is it gonna be the same for the ESSER III funds that are gonna be
I
allotted?
think that goes to 23.
20, yeah.
So the ESSER II is going to 22, and then you're gonna apply for funds for the following year to cover you to 24, is how those are running? Okay. Thanks, I wondered if they were gonna be reflected in this budget or not, but that makes sense that they're not. Thank you.
Any questions on those assumptions?
I would assume you're safe on your assessed valuation since everybody's taxes went up.
Yes.
Does anybody out there get a negative number?
Yes, I was extremely conservative on those.
Yeah.
And in our assessed valuation, that brings up an excellent point. Our assessed valuation, let's say it comes in at $160 million. Our actual collection rate is around 92%. So we actually collect 92% of that 160. And that collection rate has actually been slightly lower because we had so many people protesting their taxes, those weren't getting paid. So that rate is actually a little bit lower. So we'd have to adjust that. Hopefully those come back as people don't protest as much of their taxes. So we're hoping our collection rate comes back a little
So if you protest your taxes and you don't pay it and it doesn't come to the school, but then they do pay it at some point, do you still get to recoup those dollars?
Correct.
Okay.
And that is on your revenue sheet, I can point that out to you. I don't think there's their budget, the general summary on page 6. So our projected revenues for the upcoming school year is gonna be $24,048,317. Projected expenditures are $23,766,365.32. That actually is a surplus of $395,683. Some of that will have a surplus in debt services, which that's using our old tax levy. That's what the new tax levy calculates. So it tries to balance that a little bit. So hopefully we'll have more of a surplus under the operations budget item. So those numbers aren't exact, but we do plan on operating at least with a budget of $395,000. And at that bottom in your board packet on page 6, the operating fund balance analysis, that's where that operating fund balance percentage comes from, and we are trying to reverse that trend that we've slowly been creeping down. And on the next page, on page 7, you'll see that. Coach, do you have one more for me there? One more, please, sorry. That one right there, the historical ending fund balance for the last 8 school years. You see how we've kind of peaked a little bit and we've slowly been coming down. And notice that figure is actually 1920. We don't have final calculations for this year, but in 1920 we're at 16.72%. We've reversed that to get back over 17%. So we've turned that around, going in the right direction. So that's and we should, with everything that we've calculated at this point, be operating in a surplus for 2021. So that number should be better, but that's where we are right now.
So when looking at the projected revenues and looking at what's projected for revenue for this coming year and looking at last year, there's a pretty substantial increase in the local revenues. What's the thought? Is it just what you're expecting inflation? Is there a formula that you use around that?
I think I think we'll have a better collection rate. We'll have more houses coming on the tax rolls than what we've had with the new construction. So it's just kind of a combination of those things. I think some of the utilities will come in a little bit better. Some utilities come from the state, some come from local.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back, this is not on the slide, Coach, don't worry about it, but in your board packet, on page five is the annual budget calendar. And that's one of the things the fiscal year begins on July 1st. On August 23rd, we'll have that tax rate hearing, and then you'll see our quarterly budget summaries. And what we'll do is just look at how, are we on where we should be with our budget? Do we need to make a few adjustments? And we'll review that quarterly. And we'll give updates to the board on that. So there's a calendar on there. Coach, go ahead. And then you'll see on page 10 is your current teacher salary schedule, and we asked to increase the base by $350. And then on page 11, go ahead, Coach, thanks. Right there, future budget recommendations. I think looking forward, I think it'd be very wise for the district to develop a master facilities plan. This would include future projections on enrollment, facility needs, bonds, staffing needs, equipment maintenance, and replacement schedules. A good example is we just bought several thousand Chromebooks, and they're 1 year old. They're going to reach the end of their lifespan. What's their lifespan on those, Mr. Rhymes?
Those new ones?
Yes.
They're till 2026.
2026, so in 6 years, we're going to need full replacement of all those Chromebooks. So facilities plan, what you do is you start to schedule that, and you start to look forward, and maybe we start a schedule of every 4 years, we start to rotate out 1/6 of those Chromebooks or something along that line. That's what a master's facilities plan does.
So just for my knowledge, in school budgets, is there a depreciation line? I didn't see a depreciation line. So that's sort of what you're mentioning, is that you're gonna budget for depreciation over time for whether it's furniture, equipment, et cetera. Is that sort of that sense that there's not really a depreciation line, it would be for future projects?
Correct.
Sort of that
Yeah,
spend.
I think both of those things we would want to, but I think our facilities plan would help with that. I haven't done that before, but I think that'd be very, very wise That would be no cost. We form a committee. We'd have staff, students, community members, board members, administrators on the master facilities plan committee to start to project down the road. Adding a primary and elementary assistant principal position for the 22-23 school year, approximately $75,000 of annual expense. Replace the track surface at Panther Stadium. That would be, the life expectancy of those is around a decade. Is that correct, Coach? About a decade? Okay, so it was a one-time expense, but that would be part of that master facility plan you could calculate for. Increase the overall technology budget, not all at once, but probably in steps. I think that's something with technology ever increasing. I think that's something that we want to address. Go ahead, Coach, thanks. An ID key system for all staff. We were not able to capture that in this current bond project. I think for safety concerns down the road, I think that may be something we want to address. Full-time process coordinators, both the elementary and secondary. Right now we have a part-time. Ashley Bueno covers some of those duties. I think there's room for us to grow in that area. I think that's something we want to look at in the future. Continue to add staff salaries and benefits, allow steps on the salary schedule. It's approximately $200,000 for each step and $20,000 for each, 100 additional dollars to the base. And then additional operating expenses and as buildings expand and enrollment increases. And that's just operating within the building, increase those budgets approximately $15,000 annually per building.
Sorry for all the questions.
No,
On
that's okay.
On the positions, are the numbers that are in there the fully loaded salaries, or is it just the salary? So that's a fully loaded assistant principal, benefits and everything would be 75, or is that just their base?
That would be with benefits.
Okay. And then is there any opportunity that some of these might move up and with a little bit of a surplus? So for example, the ID key system, isn't that something that the ESSER funds could possibly potentially be used if you had the justification that it would lessen the amount of touching to the doors and whatnot?
Sure, we could probably justify that, sure. And then the last part of your budget there are the line items. I've included the last 3 school years. The highlighted column there, that's the current budget proposal for the 22-23. The column immediately to the right is the actual expenditures for 2021. The next column is budgeted 2021, and then 19-20 budget, and then 18-19 budget. Or actuals, I'm sorry, those are actuals. So you go back 3 years on those. So you have something to compare to.
Well, I just want to thank you. I know it's a lot of work to put a budget together, particularly a budget together of this size, and I know it's your first go at it, so I really appreciate all the work you're putting in. I do have just some suggestions moving forward on ways that we can make it really be a learning document. I feel strongly the budget is not only, it's the biggest communication document that we have to talk about the district, and so I think there's ways that we can communicate what we're doing with the funds in a way that's easy to understand. And so I think just some of the pieces that we could do just around organization as we're doing our quarterly reports would be really important, so that we're really clearly communicating what we're doing with the funds, and particularly what we're projecting and how we're making those decisions. And so I appreciate it. I appreciate that we're thinking about our staff at a time where it's really hard to retain, and that we have the funds to do that, and that we're moving in the right direction with our contingency funds, although they're called something else in this world.
Any other questions, comments? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget for the 2021-2022 school year as presented by Tom Huffington.
So moved.
Thank you, Joanna.
Okay, and in looking at our previous budget from 2021, there were some things in there that were not initially included in that budget. Shelley was working on this. She did the entire thing. I didn't have anything to do with the amendment, so I just want to thank her again. But right there on the inside cover, there's a few codes that have changed. So that is, you'll see those as updated. The revenue codes and expenditure codes, that's changed, whether that's come from DESI or the auditor or wherever. But those have changed the budget. Also, there were some items in there that were not originally captured. And when we get to the line items, I'll show you those. But you can see really the big things as far as revenue is the sale of our original bonds at 20 million, the CARES Act funds that came from Jackson County, the federal CARES Act funds, and then some COVID funds through FEMA also. So there were some additional revenues that we hadn't accounted for in that original budget. And then as far as expenditures, that looks like just a change in code. Is that correct, Ms. Ryan? Okay, and on the line items, you can see an adjustment on that third column. It says budget revision 1. There were significant changes from what was budgeted to what was actually either spent or received. So you can see those individually. So that's another reason for the amendment. We just want to make it accurate. What amendment does for you is in the future, it helps you're more accurate with your budgets in the future. And it's easier to project and hopefully if you do a really good job of budgeting, you should just be able to roll it over from year to year. And that's kind of what this amendment is for. We're trying to get to that.
So the biggest change was in the Title I funding, it looked like. Is that on the Title I line of the biggest change of budget to actuals? Is that because fewer funds were received or more funds were received? Or?
Well, and you'll see in special education and with title, there was actually money that wasn't budgeted. There were changes in last year's that because of the way the payments were done. So there was some money that was carried over. That we received those funds this year as opposed to last year. So that's some of the difference.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I have a motion to approve the budget amendment as presented.
So moved.
Sue? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
You gotta be verbal, too.
You gotta be quicker.
Thank you, Tamara. All in favor? That's everyone.
Thank you again.
We have a presentation by Mr. Word on the copy of the.
Hide behind the tripod while
No, you gotta come up here. We gotta get on the camera, you do too.
need to
Yeah.
click through my slides. If you guys pull up that Sumner 1 sheet, it'll give us I'll just run through a quick overview of our current Xerox environment. We currently have 16 large copiers in each building. We
Page
have,
53.
are you guys on those pages? Okay.
Page 53.
We have 5 desktop copiers in each office in each building. We have 1 color copier. It's located in the central office, so all employees, if they would like color copiers, they ask and we'll install that printer for them, and they have to come over to the central office and get those copies. Then we have 6 fax machines, and that environment is, as you can see, the average monthly cost of those roughly 21 machines. So, background on Xerox. We've been with Xerox, I've been here 20 years, we've been with Xerox, everyone, and probably long before that, I believe. I think it was my first year as director, we renegotiated our contract with Xerox. Our contract was up, and we decided to re-up with them just because of name recognition. They're reliable. One of the main reasons was support. we have a support technician who's been with us for as long as I can remember, and he's probably one of the best technicians I've worked with. He's reliable. You all know Zach. He comes out whenever we call him. So that's one of the big reasons we re-upped with them. They were really good with support, but this last couple years, we've just seemed to be taking a downturn, and not no offense that Zach's been great throughout the whole thing, but it's just the copiers, could be the age of them, but the copiers they're down more than they're up. I think you guys can attest to that. We've had Zach out here multiple times, and so that's where Sumner One comes into effect. We have 1 year left on our contract with Xerox. They will come in and purchase our contract, the remaining amount of it. And as you see, option 1 is pretty much our current environment. They've got 16 machines. As you can see, that's 60 page per minute. It's faster machines. They also have the desktop machines for the offices. They offer the paper cut software, which is Chromebook printing. Right now we don't have Chromebook printing. And then they will take back our current units, ship them back, store them until the lease is up, and send them back for us. As you can see, option 1, those savings to the right is roughly, those annual savings are quite substantial. And then option 2, which I would prefer we go with, it's the same fleet, pretty much 10 machines, but that offers 5 color copiers, 1 in each building, which will be a huge plus for the teachers, I think. And also the fax machines and the paper cut software. And so Sumner One's they work with a bunch of local districts as well. I think you've had service with them. So they guarantee 3-hour calls on if we have maintenance down. They'll send someone out in 3 hours, which is very good right now. It's just call our guy, and hopefully he comes out the next day or 2. So I would prefer we go with option 2, or we can wait until our contract's out. But right now, Sumner One is currently coming in and offering us to buy out our lease. So, any questions on those numbers, or
Well, what's our threshold for a formal bid? This is not an insignificant amount of funds per year. Is there a threshold we have to hit for a bid process? I know they've approached you as a district, but
Yep.
does that still come into play where we would have a bid threshold that we would need to follow?
And I would think, I've reached out to Canon. They were one of the companies that were going to come back with it, but I never got a proposal from them. And then I'll probably check with Xerox to see what they're offering. But this was just a company that would come in, and I've heard great things about them.
Sure. I don't question that they would do great. It's, for me, it's
Yep.
about
Oh, yeah.
just making sure
Procedure.
we're following the process and the procedure that
Yep.
we're supposed to. Cause if it is that 5,000 a month, that's a $66,000 contract, which means it's probably over a threshold, I'm gonna guess. So I didn't know if we knew what the threshold was for people.
It's much lower than $60,000.
Cause they came and said, we'd be willing to do this, is that how that?
Well, we've kind
sort
of reached out. We've been
You
hearing from
reached
yes, and reached out to companies to try to see if we. To get, because right now our Xerox is just, we're in a rut with them, and we trying to get them on the phone. It's just been one thing after another. So we're trying to be proactive and get a company in here that will.
You had good reports on this brand,
Yeah, they're offering the Kyocera copiers, and I've heard great things about. They're.
I'm clueless, so I'm just
Well, you're doing the training, so.
Oh, okay. You're in trouble then.
I will say that this is exactly what I actually did use when I was the tech director at Wellington. And so we had Sumner One, we had the Kyocera machines, and honestly, we replaced them. At that point, we were with Ricoh, which was kind of a very similar situation. We were with Ricoh forever. That's what the district used, but it got to the point where they were just expensive. We had one assigned technician like the district has here. The big advantage with Sumner One, they're actually a local company based out of Lenexa, Kansas, but their technicians are housed all over the KC Metro. And so what's neat about the 3-hour call time, it's not like they have to wait on the one guy to come here because he's assigned to your district. Any technician can pick up their trouble tickets and come and do that 3-hour window, and that's what's so beneficial about their model versus a Xerox or Ricoh, where they have the one person only who comes to work on your machines. So that's where the support level for Sumner One is a lot better.
Yeah, the 3-hour call time was a big selling
Yeah.
point. That was,
Because there was a gentleman that, when I was at Wellington, one of our main technicians that we used a lot was just actually just based out of Buckner, Missouri. And so he really just worked out of his home from a work van. We had all the parts on his van, and he was, most of the time he was our guy, but if he was, you know, in Warrensburg, they would have somebody from Graden Valley be there in 3 hours. I mean, so that's the one advantage of somewhere like Sumner One. You know, they're not gonna have just a one person tied to the district for your support. And that's kind of where we are right now, where the gentleman's done a good job, but just through structures, it sounds like, you know, he's kind of being handcuffed in a bigger picture. But then the cost savings obviously is beneficial, and
And I don't argue any of those
Yeah.
points. If I were an auditor and I came in and I looked at your books and I pulled this one to sample and I saw just a bid that was presented without any other bids, it would be a finding. And so that's just what my concern is that if we don't wanna have findings on our audit, I believe it works in the same way in the school world. So I would prefer that if we were gonna make a change, that we have either the written, here's the 3 bids we received, here's who we chose, and here's
Yep.
why, because then if an auditor pulls that, then they would be able to see that, yes, they did their due diligence, yes, they followed their procedure, and then it's not gonna be a
yeah,
finding.
and that's what I was hoping to come back with Canon and Xerox. I was hoping to come, I couldn't get anything, anywhere with Xerox. They just said, we'll wait until our contract is, of course, they're not going to
Sure.
want to.
Well, and the
come
other
back
thing
with
that
a
we
number
can
right
do
now.
is put it out for
Yeah,
bid, where you
yeah.
actually post, and that would
Yeah.
do the same, and then you
Yeah.
just get one bid, and then you're able to do a sole
Yeah.
bid. But that's just for me, if I were looking at it with an auditor's lens. And it doesn't sound, I mean, I know it's
And
urgent.
Yeah, and I
But
just think
it's-
that a lot of the companies won't come in and buy out our lease right now. So
Sure.
I mean, I'll have to reach out and find out more companies that will offer that.
you'd be surprised. That's pretty common practice with year 5 of your bid.
Yeah.
They'll do that. I mean, so you'll see that. But I will say, just I've done this exact same procedure twice already in my time as tech director. Sumner One has actually won all my bids, and I've done exactly with Xerox and Ricoh, and there's other type of firms like this that do the exact same model that Sumner One does, where, because Sumner One offers a Kyocera, Conoco Minolta, something even else. So they have different machine offerings.
They do Xerox as well too.
They have
I believe,
Xerox as
yeah.
well, and so that's where, just out of experience, I mean, this is the cheapest, but I do agree, I mean, we wanna make sure we're on the up and up with procedures as well, so.
How was the annual savings calculated? I'm trying to do the math, and maybe I'm just,
Yeah.
right.
The annual savings on
Yeah,
that.
how was that?
Well, right now, our
Is
the
there-
average monthly is 8,000 or 8,800. You see that up
Yeah,
top?
Sorry, say that again.
What we're paying right now, our current contract, up at the very top.
Okay,
That's what we're paying currently.
okay,
That was on a 60-month.
okay. So they're only buying a half a year then?
Well, we have 6 payments left for that
About
contract.
$3,500 a month difference times 12.
Right, right. No, I'm not arguing, I'm trying to make sure I understand.
Okay.
I don't know that we're in a position, well, I guess if the motion moves forward, it moves forward, but, it feels as though we'd be in a better position to make to enter into a contract that would stick if we looked at what the procedure is around the
Yeah, I
bid
agree.
process.
I
And
agree.
even if it is, cause in some of ours, if it's a certain threshold, you can just pull like
Yeah.
what they email you and say,
Yeah.
this is what we can do.
Yep.
Or sometimes you, depending on the amount, you can go to the website and say, here's what they
Yep.
typically offer. So I'm not saying that it's not needed or necessary,
Oh, yeah.
I think we'd be in a better position for it to go through without it
agree.
raising any
Yeah, I
flags if
agree.
we did that procedure.
Yeah.
Timing wise, you think you could get them, we waited the next month and you got some, another bid or
Yeah.
two? You got time enough to get the school year started, hopefully.
Yeah. they're keeping, if they're gonna hold our Xeroxes, then we're, I mean, they'll be,
It's really, you're not in a, you're kind of in a win situation, really.
yeah.
And also, the one good thing, honestly, when I went to Sumner One, they did a really good job of training staff how to use them. So it didn't all fall on the technology department. They brought their people in and actually did like building trainings, and that way they had their specialists, because, you know, day one, the tech department is not gonna be extremely knowledgeable on this product, 'cause it's new to them too. So having their specialists come in with Sumner One and actually show that, so that's one advantage, like you're saying, even if you do wait a month, this is such a well-oiled machine with their company, they'll bring their specialists in, showcase the product, have teachers come in on the back-to-school time, you know, fitting that in, that way, this is how our new copiers work.
So you don't need me for training after all?
We're still gonna need a backup, we're gonna be
We're
back
gonna
training.
need a backup. Sorry, Ryan.
So can you put it out to bid and come back to
Yeah,
us next month?
yeah.
Do that?
Yeah.
Just make sure that we're following that procedure.
sure.
Sounds like it's a great deal, but let's make sure that we're
Yeah.
doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I was hoping to have those all done, but trying to get people to turn it around.
Can you
is-
believe that? You-
Yeah.
People don't wanna give you their business,
Get a bid on
their
anything.
business, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
No, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ryan. Sure, no action taken. We have some new procedures presented by Mr. Hubbard.
Yep. Starting on page 54 of your board packet, they've got one updated policy and two updated procedures. The first one there, student transportation services, starts on 54. That's really just updating some of the verbiage that they use in this procedure. It really doesn't affect a whole lot. This talks about school transportation services, approved school transportation other than buses. Just changes some of the verbiage in there, but on page 56, part 3, requirements for transportation of students and authorized common carriers, that talks about really charter buses. And basically all it says is it updates that so you can't use a charter bus as a regular school bus. But the rest of it is just, it changes some of the wordage, in policy, I guess it's procedure EEA. So that's the first one. We've already adopted that procedure, it's just updating. The second one, EBBA, illness and injury response prevention. This one, it talks about just making sure that you are inspecting your AED machines on a regular basis. Our policy says that each building has one. This basically sets up a maintenance, not really maintenance schedule, but says on a regular basis you should have this serviced, inspected. The second part on that on page 59, this does change a little bit. This is about injury and illness response and prevention. On part 1, it does say our old procedure said that if an injury was minor for a student that didn't require that the student go home, it left it up to the school nurse to determine whether to call the parent or not. This updated procedure says that the nurse will call the parent or not. So that's something that you may wanna discuss. If you wanna keep it with, it's okay, we haven't had an issue with it, we're okay with keeping may call the parent, or do you wanna stick with this policy where it says the nurse will call the parent? And this could be anything, you know, they stub their toe in the hallway, or there's some serious things, obviously. And it does go on to include talking about, more serious injuries. It could be not immediately an emergency, but it is an emergency. But this one particular paragraph right there, that's kind of the first thing. I don't know if you want to discuss that or not. If you want to change that portion of that procedure. Our old policy says the nurse may call home, they're going to use their judgment. The new policy says they will call home. It takes their judgment out. So
Well, personally, I think that the nurse should have discretion. I think they would know whether to call or not, and I can envision that they would be on the phone all the time if they called for every single thing that walks
Especially
through
if
their
you're
door.
every
Yes.
user, yeah.
I already talked to Michelle a lot for not very much. okay with not changing that language in that one in particular.
I think I trust our nurses to make that determination as opposed to forcing them to call every time a kindergarten walks in with a Howie.
So how would we motion with that one in particular?
Well, I'll cover the rest of the policy, the procedure, and then we can,
Great. With that one though, that one is the same when it talks about the AEDs, do we have AEDs throughout the district?
yes, each building has one.
Okay, and is there already posted on there what the maintenance schedule is and all of that?
That I do not know. Does anybody know if they have a maintenance schedule posted
I
anywhere?
think there's one on ours. I think there's a little sticker on the side of the fire hall.
So that would meet the other piece too, of that.
And when the fire department comes in to do our inspections annually, that's one of the things. Continuing on with, procedure EBBA, on page 60, under emergency forms, it says that the old policy said the district would regularly request medical information. The way it's written, this new policy said it'll ask annually, so it's just once a year. On the bottom part there, medical emergencies, it just changes some of the language, once again, just some verbiage. Nothing's really changed much in that procedure. So, as far as a motion goes, that's the very top one on page 13. Approval of procedure EEA, AP1, EBBA, AP1, with, language, we just use with the.
Well, I'm trying to find where it is in that paragraph, that one about may or must.
That is on page 59.
Cause maybe we just change that.
It's line 2, section 1 there.
So we can keep keep the original paragraph, I can make a note, and when we put it in board policy, we'll make sure that paragraph stays the same.
Lines,
And these are just MSBA suggestions, we don't have to stick with them.
We have to adopt them, yes.
we're gonna leave line 2 and 3.
I can make sure, I'll just read.
Yeah, it's under just that, yeah.
Okay. We need a motion and a second to approve policies EEA, AP1, EBBA, AP1, leaving the terminology from may with the requirement to call parent based on their judgment.
So moved.
Thanks. Did you get that good?
Second.
Thank you, Monty. All in favor? That's everyone?
All right, next one on the list, on page 62, virtual courses. This is policy IGCD. Is what it's doing, it had one policy for virtual classes. This splits it into two, and it differentiates between a district's own virtual school and MOCAP, which is the outside agencies that district use, such as Launch. So it really just splits those two policies into two, changes some of the wordage around. The first one there, IGCD policy, this is virtual courses talking about within the school district. We already do all of this. It's rewriting, this is rewriting the old policy. Probably the big highlight in this policy, it talks about the district's code of conduct applies to virtual students. Is the big, probably the highlight. And then it simplifies the process of enrollment. And this is in-district virtual, which we're not offering in the future, but it's updating that policy.
So one thing that first one did, the IGCD, is also remove the whole section focused on students with disabilities, and it's only referenced in IGCDA. It struck that whole, why would we take students with disabilities for the school offered virtual?
Because face-to-face students with disabilities and virtual students with disabilities, there's no difference. There's no, as far as policy goes, they're treated the same. So if they receive accommodation modifications in C, they're gonna receive accommodation
Okay.
modification.
Okay.
And they put that with the MOCAP.
Yeah, I saw that over there, I was trying to figure out why it wasn't addressed in both. Thank
Yep.
you.
And the only other thing is that the appeal procedure, if a virtual student gets denied, it goes to the superintendent, and then it stops. The old policy, it goes to the board. So that's pretty good for you. So that's IGCD under the same motion. On page 70, IGCDA, this is the MOCAP portion of it. This is very similar to what the old policy was also. There you'll see the differentiation between students with disabilities on page 71. This is really, this is kind of the old policy that was rolled it up and made it its own separate policy. So there's really nothing as far as, no highlights on that. That's exactly what we're doing for the MOCAP.
Questions or comments? A motion to approve the policies IGCD and IGCDA.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
And the last part of that IGCD, and this is the procedure. Procedure just really outlines the steps that you take to go through it. And that is on page 75. It updates the timeline. For enrollment, we can set a specific date for the enrollment, and then have everything in writing is really what this one says. We already do both of those things. We did it as just a best practice, but it's just updating some of that, eliminate some of the old verbiage, to separate the virtual in school with the MOCAP. So that's just the procedure that goes with it.
So do you already have the time frame in mind that you're gonna suggest to put in the procedure?
Yeah, virtual, we're not offering it.
Right.
But the MOCAP, I think it's first 3 days of school, I believe.
Okay, cause there's that blank spot in there where to
Yeah.
put that in, so.
Yeah. So which is, I think, August 26th.
Are you able to just put within the first 3 days of school so you don't have to change it every year?
Questions? Comments? Entertain a motion to approve procedure IGCD AP1 as presented. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? That's everyone. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and go back into closed session before such a business.
I'll leave that motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone.
Do we need to do a roll call vote to go back into closed session? I'll move that we go into closed session.